All right, today I'm speaking to Pau Reyes of Monday Off. But before we get to the episode, do check out the new Instagram and Facebook of the White Stripe Podcast Network. That's right. We have the Benti Podcast, White Stripe Podcast, and Stripe Watch, all on one feed. Do check that out. That is at White Stripe Podcast and White Stripe Podcast Network on Facebook. All right, let's go to the show. All right. Today I'm joined by the marketing manager handling different brands. He's also the founder of Monday Off. He's also one of the hosts for their podcast, Monday Off Radio. He's worked for and started clothing brands, record labels, ad agencies, and more. Known to many as 35 Visionary. He's also one of my creative inspirations when I started out writing. You can catch him online on Instagram at 35 Visionary and at Monday Off PH. Pau, thanks for coming in.
Hey bro, how are you? Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming in, bro. I was telling a few people. I was telling a few people when you came in that I was just so excited to have you because you were there in my early days when I just started out trying to do stuff in the creative field, and then you were just there.
Why? What was I doing there?
Nothing much, but you said like, "Oh, I like this tweet," and I was like, "Yes, he likes my tweet."
That's the worst way to find validation. I'm the worst place to go for validation, bro.
Well, it helped me out in the early days, so let's just leave it there. Yeah. All right. So I've seen you go through a lot of stages. Clothing brand, record label. You've worked for big agencies, started your own. How would you narrate your process in your career?
I was talking to my wife about this last night, and I think like the major theme of my career is fake it and then figure it out later. You know?
Yeah.
And I think, it started off like that as well, because when I studied in Singapore, and then my first job in the Philippines was at Saatchi and Saatchi. So that was my first taste of actual like creative work. And it was funny though, because I was able to get an opportunity for an interview, but I really did not know like what to do, because I didn't study advertising. I studied film, so I had no idea what that world was.
Yeah.
I also know that world is very specific. So I kind of like searched it on Google. I was just like, oh, so how do you ace like an advertising interview? And they said, oh, you have to have a book prepared. And I'm like, a book? All right, let me figure that out. So what I did was I searched like advertising books, and then they kind of said that oh, you have to have spec ads in your book. So you have to have like ads, and I researched it, like, oh, what's a spec ad? It's an ad that it's an ad that wasn't necessarily for a client, but it's kind of like it's a speculative ad basically. So I'm like, all right, so like let's just fake some things, and I didn't know what to do. So I went on Visco, and I realized like, oh, I have some photos of like my old Vans shoes. I have photos of a Lego minifigure. I had photos of my friends cutting hair because they were barbers and all that. So I'm just like, all right, bet. I guess I'll make an ad out of these because that's what I have, right?
Yeah.
And I just started making ads, and I started making these fake campaigns and all that. And I went into that interview and I presented the book, and they were just like, oh, this is good. Like, how long have you been working for these brands? And I'm like, not very long. And I think like on that day, like the guy gave me a job like as a writer.
Nice. So this is how you started out, right?
Yeah.
What made you think like, oh, I want to write?
When you say write, what do you mean? Because like I've
write for a living. I'll say it that way.
Oh, right.
Because you were in film, so you had these awards and all this stuff. Yeah. Why'd you decide like, oh, I want to go into advertising and write there?
Damn, like I never really thought about that. I actually never made that decision to say like, oh, I'm gonna write for a living. Definitely as a filmmaker, I did have opportunities to write, and like I'm a big story guy. I like little stories. I'm not a fan of long films. I'm a fan like of the shortest films ever made, just because like I want to know like how somebody can tell a story in that short a time period. So it started off like writing films. So I write for visuals, I write for TV. And the job that was given to me was as a copywriter, just because like the headlines that I wrote on those spec ads, I think it kind of hit, you know?
All right.
So the guy was just like, okay, so as an art director, between an art director and a copywriter, I think I want to put you as a copywriter. So I'm like, all right, cool. And I think over the year, like while I was working in Sachi, like one of the things I did to debrief and like rest during like long days was I just
Mm.
read.
All
So
right.
I follow like a lot of these fashion blogs on Tumblr. I followed there's this blog called Four Pins. It was under Complex before, and I saw how they were able to write something. They were able to write about fashion,
Mm.
but do it in the most relatable way. Because
Mm. All
like when
right.
I read about fashion, it was like, these like capital F fashion people
Yeah.
who, who
It feels
peacock
out.
their
It
way
feels
into,
out of reach. Like I'm
yeah,
never. I'm never gonna hit that or relate to that.
like it's not accessible. It's not
Mm.
even like the craft of the writing. It's just the way that they would write and the
Mm.
topics that they would write about.
All
And
right.
I started following these guys who would write about Coach jackets and make fun of like sneakers and all that. And I was just like, you know what, like that's kind of cool. So
Mm.
that's when I started like practicing. So I would start writing just for myself. I'd
Mm.
start writing blogs, and then that's something I was able to develop over time. And
Yeah.
I thought maybe why not like throw something in for Scout or something. I don't know.
Yeah. 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 Oh,
Like
so
like
this is the start of your like scout
yeah,
days ish.
it was part of my Scout days, and it was funny because
Yeah.
like I basically sent the editor in chief a message, and I kind of told him just like, hey, like your writers for fashion kind of suck. Here's my book, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And eventually, like I was given jobs like, oh, there's this Adidas event, can you go write for it? There was this like Uniqlo event, can you go write for that? And like that's kind of like just, I guess, part of like what kept me going as a writer. But
Mm.
it was never like, I would also never call myself a writer for some reason. I feel like I don't deserve that
Mm.
title. But yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's one of the things as a creative that's super important. So you just really have to know how to write.
What about your record label? Because you had that for a while.
Yeah, Push Track. I started Push Track with some friends. It was interesting times. This was when I was still working at church.
Okay.
So working at church got me time off Mondays.
Yeah.
So I was free on Mondays, and that was the exact same time that the one of my producer friends and my rapper friend
Mm.
was free. So we
Yeah.
kind of like just dedicated Mondays to just working and
Mm.
developing our craft. Um, and then we pioneered certain things. Like there was this thing we did called Money Monday, where we released like one original track from somebody in our label every Monday.
Right. Right.
And I think like a discipline like that kind of just gets you going.
Mm. For sure.
um and it was fun. We had that label for a while. We did a couple of gigs, and then after a couple of years we just disbanded and
Right.
went our own ways.
Yeah. It's funny though, because I've seen you go through so much. Which one, in your personal opinion, do you get the most satisfaction from at the moment?
It's hard to tell. Tough times.
Mm.
Ask me again when things settle down.
All right. All right.
Because
Got
yeah,
you.
it's been rough. But
Yeah.
I think like during that time, like definitely the work I did for Push Track was fun.
All right. Yeah.
I think I was like the creative director of Push Track and one of the founders. I think my official label there was vice president.
All right.
So what that taught me was, it taught me a lot of like the business stuff. It
Oh, for
taught me a
sure. You
bit
need that.
about the
Mm.
the music industry. And like when you see just mainstream music, you kind of like see all these old guards,
Yeah.
and like the way they do like things so differently, and you kind of
For
just like
sure.
want to kick the door down and be like, all right, if you're not going to do it like that, then I'll just do it my
Yeah.
way. And then they'd look down and you're like, oh, that's not going to make you money. And then you come out of like a one night gig with like pockets of cash. Like, okay, fine, it's not in my bank account, but like we were able to tap into like a market of kids who were just willing to
For
spend to
sure.
hear some good music.
For sure.
So I think that was satisfying because I was also able to tap certain people and
Mm.
identify, like their talents.
Yeah.
So whether he was a rapper who needed to work a little bit more on just his flow, or maybe it was a
Mm.
producer who needed to work on his variety. Like I'm able to like pinpoint certain things that could
Yeah.
help people grow,
Yeah.
and I think that's what I enjoyed about it the most.
I think that's one of your skills, though. It's not that you said you wouldn't call yourself a writer. I don't think you'd call yourself these other job titles, but it's
Yeah.
also like seeing what people need to improve upon, what like what your strength is, what your weakness is. I want to ask you about Monday off because I assume that it started at that point where you had your Mondays off. So the
Yeah.
three of you are in your own like little space in the creative scene, right?
Yeah.
You got the three of you there. You're doing your own thing. Why did the specific three of you decide to join together?
That's actually interesting. What was the origin story of Monday Off? It was basically just me and Brian first.
All
So
right.
what happened was, I was done with push track, so I kind of like put that to the side already.
Mm,
So I kind of had my Mondays free, and it just didn't feel right.
yeah.
Um, because like I worked 5 days a week in church, and I'm supposed to take that Monday off as a weekend, but like I just couldn't do it.
Right. Yeah. It's a
I
weird feeling
couldn't.
too.
I really couldn't work on a Monday. I couldn't like take a break on a
Break.
Monday.
Mm,
So what I did was I just started taking up some part-time jobs here and there. So
yeah.
I
Yeah.
would pick up a job as a consultant for a brand. I would maybe take on a larger writing job or a big branding project.
Mm,
Um, and I started doing that, and then the person who would kind of like always be in my path would be Brian.
all right.
So
Mm,
if I'd work on something, I'd be like, as a writer or as a strategist, I'd be like, oh, who else is on the team? I was like, oh, we tapped Brian. And I'm like, all right,
mm,
cool. And, Brian's been a friend. I've known him for such a long time.
yeah.
But we realized that, we kind of started working together, and there was this energy, and there was this, like we kind of knew how to read each other.
Mm,
Not just as creatives, like as a creative, like I would understand him, he would understand me, but
mm,
also as businessmen, like we'd be in a client pitch meeting, and all it would take is just one look. We'd kind of just like look at each other and be like, yeah, we're not going to take that money. Or we'd
all
look at
right.
each other
Yeah.
and be like, that fee has to be brought up.
Yeah.
So, like after a while, we kind of just looked at each other, and like we stared into each other's eyes, and we were just like, okay, let's just get married. Let's just do
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
So, you know and it also helps with the business, like if you're registered, if you have
Mm,
if you have your paperwork sorted out, it's a lot
yeah.
easier to get clients.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of how it started. And we just started working together in certain projects.
How did Lex come in?
Lex was finishing his tenure at Scout
Right.
during that time. And we're homies with Lex, and we also love working with him. Brian used to work for Lex in Scout.
All right.
I
Yeah. I
used
forgot
to
about that.
write for Lex.
Mm,
So I think what the conversation was, a lot of the things Brian and I wanted to do was around content.
mm,
This was, I think, 2 to 3 years ago when um, even like the bigger brands were starting to look at content differently.
mm,
Um, and that's when I realized, like, I think I need, I think this, if we're gonna blow this agency up, like we have to figure out a way to kind of just like involve content into our strategy. And definitely, like Lex was the right one. We'd be
mm.
in meetings and we'd look at each other the same way like Brian and I looked at each other.
Like the three
You
of you
know,
just get married.
we did get married,
Yeah,
so we definitely brought him on board, and we realized that this is going to be something just fun for us.
for sure. I'm really curious though, because of course we see you guys like online. You guys got your
Yeah,
pictures. You guys got your strengths. What are the weaknesses, and how do you guys feed off each other when a weakness is starting to show?
I think that a lot of that started to come out during the pandemic.
Mm,
When we would work with each other, we would be in the same room usually. Like that's where the
right,
magic
right.
happens. When it's, I remember this one time there was a huge project that we had to work on, and it was the three of us, and we locked ourselves up in a room and just did the work. And
Mm,
we finished at like 5 a.m. and we kind of looked at each other, and just said like, hey, this is really good.
yeah,
There was
it's
that
like
moment because, like in between all like the fights, in between the arguments, in between like almost like throwing hands at each other, we had those moments of like, hey, like, can I make you a coffee? Or
yeah,
do you want to take a nap? I'll take over the work for now, and like we can
mm,
split. Like there was that dynamic, and we
yeah.
really worked well together. And then when the pandemic hit, um it's not being able to work together physically,
That sucks. Yeah, I'm sure.
married with like so it's that merged with just the stress, just the general stress of
For
like
sure, for sure.
working through a pandemic.
Yeah,
Um, like the weaknesses start to come out.
yeah, for sure.
And it's harder to call it out, you know. So there
Okay,
were
that
many
makes
times
sense.
where I would stumble and I would fall, and it's not easy for them to call it out
Mm,
because when we do have arguments, when you do have fights, it's days of not talking to each other.
yeah, yeah,
And I think that's where it gets difficult. But I mean, in terms of weaknesses, I think, our strengths are, I mean, we're pretty good with our craft, like I'd say that. But in
yeah,
terms of strengths, I think what would be better is, I don't know, it's just managing everything else externally, because it
yeah, for
has
sure.
been it has been crazy.
I'm sure
But
you got
that's
so many
not
things to
even something I
juggle.
can do.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's not something I can also do easily.
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, like, we had like a pretty big argument like a couple of weeks ago,
All right.
and I think the learning there was just like, we have to address certain things head on.
Mm,
Um, so I did give them permission, like, hey, if I stumble, you better call me out because
for
nobody
sure.
else will.
Yeah,
So
I
I
think
think
that's
that's the
yeah.
hard part, lang, with like working with friends and
Oh, for
you know,
sure, for sure. That's a hard part. It's a strength and a weakness when you work with a friend. Because
yeah,
if you trust that friend's gonna call you out, great, you know. But
yeah,
if they're not gonna call you out, that's just gonna ruin so many things. So
yeah, for
I see
sure.
how difficult it can be, especially online. Because like, if you're in person, you're gonna say something right away. You're like, oh, your initial reaction, you can read a face, you can
Yeah,
see what they're thinking. Online,
yeah,
you
for
can
sure.
scene zone someone for like 2 days, 3 days, and like what you're saying, that's so hard.
Yeah, I mean, it almost happened. Like, something like that almost happened. I was almost so pissed that I almost drove to like one of their
yeah,
houses. Like, I was just like, you're gonna talk to me, or yeah, we're not breaking up.
yeah, yeah. You're like, keep this relationship strong.
Yeah, and I think what's important also is just recognizing that we're friends first. Like, these
Mm,
guys are my
yeah,
best friends. I
yeah,
work with my best friends, and that's
yeah,
not easy.
yeah.
It's not easy working with your best friends, but um, I mean, the emotional support is there, but there
Mm,
are times where you have to really remember to. I think this is my weakness, is I can get so caught up in the work. I can
mm.
have my head down and just so
All
focused.
right.
But as the manager of um, the group and as the one leading them, I have to every now and then like look up and check on my people, like, hey, how are you doing? Like, are you
Mm,
okay?
yeah.
And even if the work is so important, like I have to continue to learn that it's not as important
Mm.
as the friendship that I have.
That makes a lot of sense. It's nice to hear that other side of
Yeah.
the work. Because, like, when you go online, it looks all, hey, these guys are great. You know, they're always working together.
Oh yeah,
You
we
guys
are
are,
great.
yeah, you guys are great, but, like, you don't really see the back where
Yeah.
it gets really difficult when you work with friends.
Yeah.
Um, but then, yeah, you guys have great work, so good job for that. Tell me about
Thank you.
Monday
Thank
Off
you.
Radio. Because here's the thing: when you guys started the podcast, I
Yeah.
remember that was what I was thinking about starting a podcast a few months before you guys started Monday Off Radio, and then
Hmm.
you guys did it. And when I saw you guys do it, I was like, hey, that looks like so fun. I
Yeah.
want to do that. You guys got a few guests on. You guys talked about stories.
Hmm.
It didn't seem too formal, which I liked.
Yeah.
And I was like, yo, like every Monday, I just listen to your podcast. I remember, like you guys got even some 30-minute
You listen.
podcasts.
You listen to everything.
I have listened to everything every Monday
Damn, we're
morning.
sorry, bro. We apologize.
It's alright, bro. So every Monday morning, I remember I'd wake up. People are sharing the episode on my feed on
Yeah.
their stories and stuff. So I'm like, all right, I'll listen every Monday. And then just while I'm brushing my teeth or when I'm doing something, like I'm just listening to the podcast. So I do miss it. But then tell me about that. How'd that start out? What made you guys do it? Because it's not
Mm.
like you're earning big bucks from it, but like what made you think like this is worth doing?
So we, as people who identify trends in media, we noticed that podcasts were starting. We've been listening to podcasts,
Yeah.
and we noticed that it was starting to become a little more mainstream, and we kind of like saw it when I think it was Spotify started putting stuff out on
Yes.
started
Yes.
invest
Exactly.
they made that like huge investment for podcasts. When we saw that, or when we got wind of that in the business news, that's when we realized like, oh, this is going to be big. Like,
Mm,
I kind of want to get my foot in the door first.
yeah.
It's interesting though, because like we were working with a client, and the client was just like, hey, how do I sort my content out, or like what else can I do to
Yeah.
make this good. I was just like, yo, do podcasts, bro. Like, just do podcasts. Like, do one a week, or like, if when you get better, like, do 3 times a week.
Yeah.
And like, this guy was like, all right, whatever. Like, I'm gonna think about it and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And like a month later, he drops 20 episodes
Dang,
because
20 episodes.
he recorded like 1 or 2 a day in his studio.
How long
with
is it
guests.
per episode?
Hour and a half.
Jeez.
Yeah, this guy went
That's
in.
crazy.
And so he went in 20 episodes, and then when he
Yeah.
was like 40, 50 episodes, like I was kind of like getting pissed at him already. It was just like, yo, like, you actually did it, and you're doing it well. And then I think when I dropped by in the meeting, like maybe 3, 4 weeks later, he showed me the earnings, and I was just like I'm okay. I'm like, I hate that I didn't start this yet.
Yeah.
And like, he kind of like clowned me. It's just like, yeah, you're the one who told me to do it, so I did it. Like, I thought you guys were gonna do it. And
Yeah.
then I think that's when we decided, like, let's do it. Let's start a podcast. We didn't have mics. We didn't have a studio. All we had were 3 charming personalities that were painful to listen to. And then we just decided to do it. So the idea is, we call it a studio. But what it really is, I'm pulling back the curtains now. Like, it's just my car, So it's my car parked in top floor parking of Molito. So
there you go.
So we're not loud. And the worst part, but it's also the best part, is we can't use aircon.
Yeah, because you're gonna hear that if you
exactly.
Have aircon.
So can you imagine 3 guys in a car with like the seat reclined, and we had those the pop filter afros.
Yeah.
We found that, and we just put it on our phones, and then that was our mic.
Do all of you have one phone each?
We have one phone each.
All right.
Yeah, so we did that, and like, by the 30th minute we had to cut. So if you notice the podcast, like, we do like 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and then it's all kind of in segments. That's not that wasn't intentional or planned. That was out of necessity, because by the 15th minute, no aircon in the middle of like a hot summer day, like, you could literally like taste the sweat.
Jeez.
And like, like the windows would like fog up. So there were times like the windows would fog up, and then like a guard would kind of like take a peek.
Yeah.
So that something's happening inside, right? And then like we'd come out, like 3 guys would just come out like that,
Yeah.
So yeah, those are good times actually. Those are good times.
I found that really interesting when you said that Spotify was a really big push for you guys, because now that I realize it, that was a really big push here. Because I remember when podcasts, because I've been listening to podcasts probably since 2016, 17. Whenever someone would say like, oh, where do we listen to podcasts? I'll always be like, do you have an iPhone? Because like, you can listen to it on Apple Podcasts and it's free. Like, I had to tell them, I'd be like, yeah, guys, listen to it. It's free. Don't worry about it. And then suddenly Spotify comes in. Hey, we want to start distributing podcasts. And everyone's like, oh, like, that's pretty cool. Like, now you can actually listen to podcasts. Because before, from what I remember in Spotify, you actually had to like register as like an artist if you wanted to have a podcast up. And it didn't go out well for a lot of people. It wasn't a big platform. Suddenly Spotify, huge investment, buying all these different podcast networks. And you guys started Monday Off Radio doing that. When you guys first started off Monday Off, when you guys first started Monday Off Radio, were you guys thinking like, oh, we're going to use this to help people consult, or we just want to tell stories?
It was really for us. Like, honestly, when we were doing podcasts, this is the one thing we weren't doing for other people.
Yeah.
I think what we wanted to do was we wanted to capture a moment in their lives. We wanted to tell these stories that we wouldn't usually talk about.
Yeah.
It was therapeutic for us. I think I think that's it. Like, honestly, like, we started just doing it for us.
Yeah.
And I think that was the fun part.
When I remember one of my favorite episodes from you guys just talked about your morning routine. That's my favorite episode, to be honest. I love that episode. I'm just listening to you guys.
What did you like about it?
I don't know. Like, I'm just like, oh, you guys are relatable. I'm
You
like,
mean like
oh,
we're real people?
yeah. I'm like, oh, these guys are real people. They're not just creatives, cool guys on Instagram. Like,
It's funny though, because I get that a lot. Like,
yeah,
oh, we're relatable, but like it makes me wonder, like, what makes us feel like we're not, Like that's my insecurity sometimes.
yeah. I think it's also like the whole persona of everything going on creatively, and you guys with the shades and the nice pictures. People try to
Yeah,
be like,
we're
oh,
rock
like,
stars.
yeah, that's a big thing. I don't think people see you guys behind the scene that often. So I like that episode.
Mm.
I remember when you guys started out, I have these friends who know who you are, right? Or who know
Yeah.
who Lex is or Brian. And then they're like, oh, Monday off, Monday off. And then they'll ask me, like, oh, what's Pau like? And I'm just like, he's a chill guy.
No, seriously, what do you say?
No, I no, I'll be like, he's a chill guy, like really creative. And then they're like, oh, but what's he like when he's not working? And I'm just like, I don't know. Like, he's really cool. Like, I go to his house during Christmas. And
Thank you. I try to be cool.
yeah, all right. So I found this really interesting. And is that something you guys try to do on purpose? Like, we want to be relatable?
No, we don't think about that side,
All right.
honestly.
Yeah.
I think when it comes to like presenting ourselves, this is who we are,
Yeah.
Um, we're not the type like the whole shades thing. Like, I mean, like, yeah, I mean, we do our best to dress well. I mean, it's
Yeah.
part of like the
It's part
business,
of it.
right?
Yeah.
Like, it's also not just part of the business. It's just like what we enjoy
Yeah. Yeah.
doing. Like, we enjoy clothes, we enjoy dressing up. Like there are times like we go out on like ukay trips and like just go home and like do
Oh,
like
that's the
a
best.
fashion runway show for each
Yeah.
other, or like we'd send each other pictures. Like, like that's kind of just like
Yeah.
our thing.
Yeah.
So we don't really think about like how we present ourselves at this point anymore.
Mm.
Um, I guess what you see is what you get for us.
Nice. Yeah. All right.
We're
We're gonna.
children, basically.
All right. We're gonna go take a quick break. When you come back, we'll talk about creatives in the pandemic.
Let's do it.
All right. We're back from the break. We're still with Pau. I want to ask you a few things about work now, because it's just so
Go.
different. When I think about working in 2020, whether it's being creative, whether it's doing things, creating content, all that stuff. What's the biggest difference between working in a creative field pre-pandemic and within this pandemic?
Um, like it's cliche to say, but like everything changed.
Mm,
It's not just the ways of working, it's also the platform,
yeah.
the channels, the type of content that you produce. I think 2020 is just such a, how do you say this? Like 2020 is just such a mess, to a certain extent that, there's so many things just happening. Like even, just yesterday it was the start of the election, and even if that doesn't affect us just because you're on social media, like it does, it really does affect us.
Yeah.
So I guess there's that. But I think it's been different. Like there are certain ideas that we had planned for this year,
For sure.
that we just can't do anymore.
For sure. For sure.
There are certain things that we want to do. We wanted to really explode this podcast, but now that we can't record together, it just feels different.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's just it. Like too much has changed that I can't even look back and figure out like what has changed. It's more of like me like looking forward and be like, all right, like how do we adapt? Because we're at that point already, I think, as creatives, like, oh, if you don't adapt and if you're so focused on like what that past would look like, then it's not gonna work out for you. Like the people who adapt the quickest win.
Right. Yeah.
That's
really interesting, because when you look at online media now,
yeah,
I feel like people are becoming super careful with what they're saying. You can argue it's a good thing, you can argue it's a bad thing, like it's being fake and all that stuff. Where do you land on like, oh, we're in the middle of a pandemic, like our messaging has to be very different, like we can't do what we usually do? Where do you land on that personally?
I think there is like a space to be sensitive. I think people have to be sensitive, especially in this day and age. I think where do I land is it's always a question of like, what is the intention of this piece of communication? Like,
Right.
is it really out to offend someone?
Mm.
Because like you could get caught in that mix.
Oh, for sure.
But it's also like, a matter of like not overthinking it also. Um, I think like there's that question about being politically correct.
All
We had
right.
the conversation I think with Sai Villafuerte, one of my favorite writers, and like we just had the discussion that um like you don't you have to be careful, you have to also like be sensitive, but I think we're at a place where a lot of people don't get to say what they want to say anymore.
Yeah, I agree.
Like I'm not sure where you guys stand with that, but for me it's like, okay, like this is what I want to say, maybe I just have to fix the way I say it.
All right. Fair.
Like I think like I was on TikTok last night. I was just like scrolling. I was just
Yeah.
doing my little midnight TikTok scrolls.
Yeah.
And did you like, if I'm not sure if you know this, but like Gen Z, like the Zoomers, um, if you don't have context, they can be the most insensitive people.
Okay.
I've seen TikToks where like they would literally make fun of like gay people
I
or
haven't seen
black
that, but
people,
okay, I
but
believe that.
they would do it in such a way that you get a little giggle, but you know that they weren't trying to offend you.
Oh, I see. All right. Yeah.
They're not being racist.
Yeah.
They're not trying to be homophobic. They're trying to be funny, and I think TikTok is that space. The same thing with comedy. Like, if you take a joke out of a comedy stage and you put it in conversation, like obviously that's not gonna work out.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think people forget that about communication, that it's not just what you say, it's how you say it. It's how you say it, but also where you say it.
Yep. I
You
agree.
know?
Yeah.
And it's also the context. Like if I made the joke that, that Gen Z Zoomer did, obviously that's not gonna do well for
Yeah.
me.
Very
But
different.
because there's context to it, then I think that's what makes it different.
Yeah. I think that's a very interesting take when you talk about being politically correct, etc., etc. I feel like there's a space for saying what you need to say, what you want to say, but a lot of people focus on the content itself, and not how it's said. I feel like what you said earlier was very important, where you can say two different things in two different platforms, and it's a very different story.
Yeah.
Just to get a bit into it, for example, if you post something in Facebook versus Twitter, very different response what you're gonna get. So and how you say it as well. Is there any hate behind it? Is there any is it well written? So I think that's really important when you talk about writing.
I mean, like definitely it's a platform thing too.
Yeah.
Like I think the one problem, and I think I will say this.
Yeah.
I won't censor it. The one problem our people had during the last election, I blame it on free data.
Oof.
I blame it on Facebook free data. I blame it on people only seeing the headline and not having data to click into the article.
That's a great
Because
point. I didn't think
the
about that.
whole thing is like, even with media, like I mean you can't forget about the fact that media earns money with every click.
Yeah.
And for you to get a click, your headline has to be, to a certain extent, it has to be clickbaity.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we are in a place where free data roams, or like, when people are on Facebook, they don't click past the headline. But yeah, definitely it's a platform thing. So that's one. The other one is a platform thing where I can say a joke on Twitter and it would go well. I can't do that on Facebook just because I know who follows me there.
That's a different story. Excuse me. The point with free data, I think that's very interesting, because it's not that the data is free necessarily. It's that they can't click the link because the limitations of free data stop it there. So you can't read beyond the headline, and the headline is like absurd. So you're like, oh my gosh, like I'm gonna share this and react right away, compared to like actually reading it. It's a hard thing to swallow, especially when you talk about media and the way it earns money through revenue. You have to have the clicks. You have to have all these things. I want to jump ship a little bit, but still talk about money.
I like money. Let's go.
For sure, creatives want to be paid, right? Like that's not a big thing to say. Like everyone knows we want to be paid, right? No matter if you're a graphic designer, a painter, a singer, whatever, a writer, we all want our work to be valued, right?
Yeah.
But it seems as if the market isn't valuing the content or the product that's created as we'd like to. in your viewpoint, is this a market problem or is it our problem on not valuing our own work high enough?
It's a hard thing to say because I want to say it's our problem,
All right.
but there are people who are charging 500 pesos for a photo shoot,
Yeah, I've seen those.
and I don't consider them part of us.
Mm,
You know, like you're not creative. Like for
mm,
me, like that's kind of how I see it. You're not part of this creative community. Um, I think it's two ways though. Like I have a draft where I did analyze the market and where we are, but I think just to kind of like sum it all up, well, the market is able to do this to us because people who identified with us have allowed it. Does that make sense?
okay.
So, for example, if my rate is here, if this
Yeah.
is my rate,
Yeah.
um, but somebody who thinks they could do what I do well without any training or without any heart or without any actual learning, like just comes in and says like, oh, I can do that
Yeah.
and charges this much, then the company from a business perspective would
Yeah.
never want to charge this much because they know that the rate is here. But
Yeah.
the truth is, like, it's not good. Like, for example, if they're gonna hire somebody to make content, and they're charging super low, so they're gonna pay the lowest price, but the content isn't good. So now you're in a cycle of just bad content,
Yep. Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's horrible about it. But it's also just the change in technology too, and like just the
Mm.
way things are done. I was telling Brian, and I think Brian's in a great place because he's an illustrator, and
Yeah.
illustrator gets to actually have like their proper work. So I told him like, I'm not like, don't build yourself as a graphic designer.
Mm.
Like build yourself as an illustrator because nobody can illustrate the way that you do.
Yeah.
Graphic design, now that Canva is like getting strong,
Oh yeah, for sure.
like anyone can be a graphic designer now.
Yeah.
That's the truth. Which is why I go back to that first point that as a creative, I mean, yeah, you could be a good photographer, you could be, a good graphic designer, but you have to be able to do something that nobody else can do.
Yeah.
And I think that's what matters. What matters is perspective and like
Yeah.
how the way you see things. Like, everybody can write, but
Mm.
nobody can write like me,
Mm.
or
Yeah.
everybody can make content, but not the way I strategize. And
Mm.
anyone can make a podcast, but not the way you, Trey, would
Mm.
make a podcast. So
Yeah.
the truth
Yeah.
is, Trey, like everybody and anybody can do what you do.
For sure. I agree with that.
But the reason why I listen to you is because I want to hear your perspective on things.
Yeah. Thanks, bro.
And that's what
Yeah.
really sets you apart as a creative.
Yeah. I agree. When I asked this question, I was very curious about your answer because you can look at it and it can go both ways. You can say
Yeah.
like, oh, the market doesn't value creatives probably because there are no creatives who are making the big decisions. You can also say exactly what you said. Like, if I offer my rate at like, let's just say a project for 10,000 and this other guy is saying 2,000, I'll be like, hey, probably go for the other guy if they don't really know much about it, if they can't strategize for it. So I do understand where you're coming from. So I think it's a bit of both. But where you landed, it's more important. I think it's important for creatives to hear because it's hard to say like, oh, I'm valuing myself or my work at this much. It's a hard thing to hold on to when, let's say, no one's biting it. No one's going like, oh, we want to work with you. But then we'll talk about this again a bit more later on. But yeah, any final thoughts
I
on that
have an
part?
example
Yeah, go
of
ahead.
that, and I think it's not just like the way creatives are done. It's just things in general have just changed. I gave a talk like Monday Off gave a talk with PHX. It's a Philippine fashion conference, so we
All right.
we did a little bit of a live seminar thing, and we were talking about just fashion and retail. And I think this is something close to my heart because it's part of the work that I do. But the idea of a multi-brand, for example, a multi-brand is a brand that carries different brands. So
Yeah.
you could say a multi-brand is like a brand that carries Nike, Adidas,
Right.
Vans, and all these other brands, right? What's interesting and what's happening now was before the lockdown, Nike actually pulled out of Amazon.
Oh.
So Nike pulled out of Amazon because they wanted to focus on DTC. DTC is direct to consumer.
Right. Yeah.
So when you cut out of that middleman, and because like everything's well done online already, like you get, I'm pretty sure you got hit by a Nike ad, or whoever's listening to this gets hit by a Nike ad.
Yeah.
Like that inventory could be in Hong Kong, but because of the way that their website's so set up, like they're focused on getting you your product from them.
Yeah.
So they don't parang want to go through Amazon anymore because it takes a bit of their margin off.
Yeah, for sure.
So as a business decision, there are certain brands who do it well. Like there's this brand called Satisfy Running where they pulled out of like all the huge retailers and decided, you know what, we're gonna ship directly to you.
Right.
And for that to happen, the brand has to be very, very strong.
Yeah, I agree.
Because
That's hard.
there are some fashion brands, and there are some brands who, like their strength is in the store that sells them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think what's happening now, for example, with multi-brand retailers is that they carry all these things, but they don't have a perspective. That's not gonna work out anymore. Like multi-brand retailers now, like they have to have a very specific point of view. Not just in like how they show certain things, but in the way they buy certain things. All like right. They have to be communicating directly to a market. And I think that's just another point on like the importance of just having a point of view and perspective. I mean, I'm not sure how things will be in the next few years, but I do see that that's where the value is now.
That's a really interesting way of seeing how the market has changed so much.
Yeah.
When you talk about online retail, you talk about stores, you talk about brands, you do all these things. How do you, for you personally, how do you keep working creatively and stay sane? I know that's a hard question to answer because you never really know if you're staying sane. But I'd rather say it like, same. How do you keep growing and keep a healthy mindset? I'd say it more like that.
I think what's important is you really have to definitely like a strong mindset, but like how do you get there? I think that was my challenge during the pandemic. Because
sure.
Pandemic, and then you get your pay, you get your salary cut. You start thinking of all these things, and like it's just heavy and everything, and you're
sure.
kind of like trying to work through that. I'm not gonna lie, like one of the things that I started doing when all this started was I started taking my quiet time seriously. I can't deny the fact that
right.
helped so much. So I'd wake up, if my work starts at 10 and I have to be at the desk by 10, I'm up at 8. Shower, breakfast, and then I spend like a solid like 30-45 minutes just quiet time, coffee, journal, read my Bible. And that's the only way I find that I get set up for the day.
Yeah. That's a really refreshing take on
why what else have you heard
on the morning, on the creative morning. It's not wake up feeling determined, all that stuff, scroll through Instagram. That's just
like some mornings involve crying, and that's important.
I agree.
Clip that's what you post on social. Some mornings involve crying, and that's necessary.
I think it's impressive hearing it from you talking on this podcast. So that's gonna have a big impact on people. All right.
Thank you. I hope so.
When you talk about brands you're working with, right? One special one it seems to be special, at least on your feed. You're always posting about it. You're always talking about it. Help me out. Is it Aesop? How do you say it?
It's Aesop.
Aesop. All right. I've never actually heard it. All right. So when you talk about Aesop, what makes Aesop special as a product and a brand? Because you've been working with them for a few months now, right?
Yeah, I hit my 1 year yesterday.
Oh, congratulations. I didn't know that.
Thank you.
What makes them special in your opinion?
I don't know. I've been using Aesop for a long time. I think what made it special is just like it's good product. Like I'm not gonna lie, like they have really good product. But what's also important is like how much they value creativity and the arts, and design in general. So you look at the way that their packaging is designed. You look at the way they design from a product standpoint. You look at the even the stores that they do is just so well done. For example, There's a store in New York where the interior is made out of old newspaper block made into blocks, you know.
Mm.
And the reason behind that was the location they're in now. It was actually like the old newspaper office,
Okay.
you know. So they have certain things like that, and you know, it's really just like coming from a design standpoint. Like if you have a skincare brand and a body care brand that values design so much, like that's what I want to align to, you know.
Mm. Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
it's just a matter of like, oh, they get it, you know.
Mm.
They're also, you know, like with skincare brands, some skincare brands in the Philippines, it's always like, oh, it's whitening, oh, it's
Yeah.
brightening,
Yeah.
it's anti-age. I mean, the truth is like this is the color that we are like, and
Mm.
I don't know, maybe it's 2020, but I don't want to get any whiter than this. Um, but also like, what was I about to say? Yeah, it's that you know, people will age.
Mm.
Like I
Yeah.
don't get why Filipinos love this anti-aging thing. Like we're all
Yeah.
gonna get
Yeah.
old. You might as well just keep yourself healthy. And I think that's you know, that's what Aesop does. But
Mm.
I mean, I would love to get into it, but for people who are interested in like taking care of the skin, interested in smell goods, definitely like just check out the brand if that's
Yeah.
something you're interested in.
Are there any other brands that stick out for you where you just say, I love working with these people, or I love the product, I love writing about this, talking about this?
I've started without getting into too much
All
detail.
right.
Um, I'm enjoying I'm enjoying just being able to handle some part of Stussy.
Mm. All right.
Um, that's one of the things that I enjoy also. Just working with certain brands, and I think Stussy over the past few years, like they've started just like tightening and honing down on
Mm.
who they are as a brand, and I think that's
Yeah.
important.
Yeah.
So I enjoy brands that get it, but also enjoy brands that know who they are. I think
Yeah.
that's the most important thing. Like I don't enjoy brands who have to ask me what they think about this in
All
terms
right.
of perspective.
All right.
I like brands who I know what their take is on something.
Yeah. Yeah. I read this book once, Herding Tigers. I love that book. It was a book about creatives and leadership, all that stuff. One of my favorite chapters talked about boundaries.
Hmm.
And in the book, it says to fully unleash a creative, right? You have to set boundaries. It's a weird thing to hear, right? But because we think all creatives, like it's all flying around colors, all that stuff, right? But he said the most beautiful picture you can paint as a creative is when you have four walls and you say, stay within the four. Do anything you want within the four walls. Go work. So I
Yeah,
think that's an important take that you had, because I agree with you. I've tried working with people that they had no idea what they're trying to do.
yeah.
And it's all over the place. It's so hard.
I mean, if you want to talk about boundaries, like let's just talk about Twitter. The best tweets were under the OG limit. You know,
I agree.
I think one of the worst things Twitter has done creatively was extend that limit.
Yeah.
Just because like when you're limited by the character count, you know, that's when the best stuff comes out.
Yeah.
Um, but even in work, you know, like if you're working on if you're working on a strategy, sometimes the best ideas are the cheapest ones, and they weren't cheap by design. It's just they were cheap because they had nothing else to do.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. When you talk about that, when you talk about Twitter, when you talk about cheap designs, all that stuff,
Yeah.
I'm curious about what you think about this. Because when people think about, let's say, a business, they're thinking about content, they're talking about valuation, all that stuff. In your opinion, how should someone value themselves in terms of creative work, content? Is it time? Is it skill? What is it in your opinion?
It's different. It's going to be different for everyone else.
Mm.
Um, what have I started doing recently? I started charging higher
Mm.
just because it's pandemic.
Yeah.
Are you gonna make me work through this stress? Yeah, I want to charge a little higher.
Yeah.
Because yeah,
Yeah.
no, it really is a little different. Like it is a
Mm.
time thing, but um, I think one of the things I don't like doing is getting charged per hour.
All right.
I
Mm.
think, you know, like I think I'll put that out there. Like it's not. I get why it's necessary. I get how finance has to kind of like put put a figure to it, but I hate getting charged per hour. Like,
Mm.
um, for example, a graphic designer, um, he has to make a poster, and let's say that poster is going to cost 5,000 pesos, right?
Yeah.
And then the client will be like, oh, how much are you? Oh, like, okay, thanks for the 5,000. How much are you going to charge per hour, and how long are you going to do it?
Mm.
Like for me, like that's the most BS thing, because like as a graphic designer, yeah, I could do that in like 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Still gonna have to charge you 5,000.
Mm.
So don't, like, for me, like that's my thing. Like I don't want to get charged per hour. Like,
Mm.
like if you're gonna charge me per hour, I say I'll do it for 5 hours and I charge 1,000 per hour.
Yeah. Exactly. And you spend months, years honing the skill to do it in an
Yeah,
hour. So it's not like I don't want to put people down who do manual labor, but it's not similar to that. If you're doing manual labor, you're doing something per hour. Your output is usually per hour.
yeah,
If you're in a field where you can do things within 30 minutes or it can take 8 hours,
yeah,
your rate's your rate. I think that's an important thing to stick by. Um, I'd understand if you're starting out, you're like, how much do you want to be paid per hour, et cetera, et cetera. But the thing is, with creatives, you're not going to have hours and hours and hours of work to do, usually.
oh well, some of us do, but
Oh,
I think
yeah.
it's nice to kind of like put a figure to it.
Yeah.
One of the things I tend to do, and I've seen this in some clients, is they would be like, oh, so you're charging 10,000 for like this entire project,
Mm.
right? And be like, oh, how much is your work per hour? And then I'd be like, oh, it's gonna take us 10 hours, but per hour I charge 1.5. You know,
Ah,
I mean,
fair.
if you want to pay me per hour, you
Fair.
have to pay me. You
Mm.
have to pay me my hourly rate. But
Mm.
you know what? Look at it from the bright side. I'm actually giving you a discount if you do it by bulk.
Yeah.
So like, it's one of those things where you kind of have to have balls as a creative.
Yeah.
You kind of have to understand like how much it's going to cost you, and then stick to that, as much as possible.
I
And
agree.
there will be times you have to negotiate in and out, but you stick to that.
Yeah. Now that you don't consider yourself a creative now professionally. You're
Yeah,
now technically you're the marketing manager of,
yeah.
all these different brands. What's the transition like from and what's the difference? Because to be honest, to me, when you say marketing manager, in my head, it still sounds like, oh,
Yeah.
creative work. But what's the difference?
Oh, huge difference. Instead of Photoshop, I'm working on Excel.
Ah, geez.
Instead of Illustrator, I'm on Keynote.
All right. Yeah.
That's what it, well,
Okay.
that's what it
All right.
is, being
All
a
right.
marketing manager. I think, yeah, the main difference is you're not looking at content. You're not looking at things you're producing.
Mm,
You're looking at why you're producing it, how much do you have to produce it, when do you need to produce it. You're looking at definitely like a much bigger picture.
all right. All right.
And as a manager, I'm also handling people. So
Okay. Yeah.
I'm
Good point.
I'm also handling like the HR side of things. I'm also handling the
That's hard.
managerial side of things. I'm also managing certain hours. It's a little hard, but
Yeah.
I feel like it's a skill that I want to grow into personally, which
That's
is why I
nice.
took
Yeah.
the job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you still have a few things dipped into the creative side? Do you still have to say on, I don't like that poster? Do you still do that? Or is that not where you're
Oh
at
yeah,
right
no,
now?
that's still on
Okay.
me.
Okay.
Um, I'm blessed to have a solid team. I'm
Mm.
blessed to be able to like let them go.
Mm.
I think the only clearances we have to do sometimes are like just the big ones, and it's not just me. I have to also elevate that up
Yeah,
to
yeah,
certain
yeah.
people.
Yeah, yeah.
So there is that dynamic that I have to also consider.
That's a
But
yeah.
I think what's interesting is that I am a creative. Just
Mm.
I am a creative. It's just my role doesn't allow me to be the one to produce these things
Yeah.
anymore. I'm totally fine with that.
Yeah.
But what's good is I know how to build on certain things. But
Yeah. That's a really interesting way to look at it. You went from creative just writing on, anything, I suppose, on these certain ads, and now you're actually managing all this stuff. And what you were saying, when you go to the business side of things, it's really different when you talk about it.
Mhm.
Because when you're tasked, hey, make this many posters or this
Mm.
many posts, captions, all that stuff, you're like, all right, yeah, cool, I can do that. But when someone says like, hey, you have to talk to this person, he's not doing his work properly, or or you're thinking like, oh, like I have to, maybe fire someone. That it gets really difficult when you talk about that kind of stuff. But I think it's the right move that you went into. All right, are you ready for the speed round?
I'm as ready as I could be. What are the rules?
All right, so the rules of the speed round: answer as honestly as you can and as fast as you can, but focus on the honesty part. Feel free to elaborate your answer afterwards.
Okay.
All right. Give me your skincare routine.
Skincare routine. I wash. Specifics?
Yes.
So I wash with Into Minds facial cleanser from Aesop, just because I have a combination skin, and
All
then
right.
I tone with BNT balancing toner,
Mm-hmm.
just because it works well with sensitive skin. If I feel like it, and if it's a rough night, I'd use Sublime from Aesop, which it's a night mask that I can leave on, set it and forget it, and then go to sleep and wake up and wash it off.
All right.
But if my usual would be Into Minds facial hydrator
Mm.
from Aesop as well.
Nice. And that's the end of your routine?
That's yeah, good sleep and water.
All right. Yeah. Tell me, of all the things that he's produced and made, what's Kanye's best work?
Twitter.
Why? Why Twitter?
His tweets are so real.
Mm.
I'm not saying it's good. I'm not saying he's correct. I'm just saying like that's the real thing. But I think one of my favorite things he's ever produced was that's a hard one. Can't answer that.
If you can, it's fine. We can move on.
Yeah, we can move on.
All right.
But Twitter's my answer.
That's cool. My next question is actually, what's your relationship like with Twitter in 2020?
The drafts are overflowing.
Oof. How many of them do you have on there?
The drafts are overflowing. There's a lot of things that I've tweeted into the draft void that I'm not ready to put out yet.
All right, fair. I have a few of those as well. All right, among all your purchases, non-essential items, something you don't need. So don't consider a car, a house.
Oof.
It's not part of it. What's your favorite non-essential item that you've purchased?
When's the time frame?
Last, I'll say 8 years.
Last 8 years?
Yeah.
Favorite non-essential item. 2 TVs in the house. When I was a kid growing up, I've always wanted to have a TV in my room.
Okay.
Now I have a TV in 2 rooms.
Jeez. Do you and your wife just use one TV each? Like, why do you have two?
We have one in the bedroom. We don't have like rooms. We have like one room and then one living room. So we have one TV in the bedroom, which is where a lot of the watching happens. And then we have one TV in the living room that we kind of just like put whatever random show on if we're like washing the dishes or cooking.
All right. What's one brand campaign or strategy that you wish you came up with?
That's a good one. I wish I came up with there's this brand called Amelia Andor, and they had this campaign this current season where they basically just did a video of real New York people in a studio, and the soundtrack was beautiful, the shots were beautiful. It was the most simple idea I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And it's also an idea that everybody who works in fashion would have. I'm pretty sure of it. But nobody was able to do it just because they think it's too simple. But these guys were able to execute it with so much class and just beauty that for me, I wish I had the balls to do something like that.
Nice. Simplicity. What's on your Netflix watch list right now?
I'm finishing up Emily in Paris.
Okay.
I just finished Queen's Gambit.
I heard it's good.
Oh, it's beautiful. You should watch it. Currently watching. Oh, I just finished Hospital Playlist.
Oh, how's that?
Hospital Playlist was good. So if you like a slow Korean drama with like nice little bits of humanity, that's good. Reply 1988.
I love
is
Reply.
on my list because I kind of want to watch it again.
Yeah. All right.
What's that other one? The other one, the one that people are watching now. I'm watching that too.
Startup. That one? Record of Youth.
Record of
All
Youth.
right.
I'm in the middle of it. And then Startup is on my list as well.
All right. I haven't started Startup. I'm gonna start that when it's almost done.
Yes, yeah. Let's. I think I want to do that as well.
All right. Who's your dream podcast guest?
Dream podcast guest would be dang. Honestly, like the Monday Off wives.
Mm.
I wanna
Why
have
haven't you had that yet? Other
because
than
we
Lex
don't
not
want
having a
it.
wife.
We don't want it. It's scary.
All right, fair. Is this like all your humanity is gonna be exposed
Yeah, I'll
in
probably be
30
quiet the
minutes?
entire episode. Yeah, I'll just keep quiet and just let them go.
All right. What's your biggest professional regret?
Um, that's deep, bro. I think deepest personal, professional regret was probably not jumping in sooner.
Mm.
There were
Okay.
certain opportunities that, like, I knew was possible. I knew I could get, but I didn't,
Mm.
just because I was scared to do it.
Okay.
So that's it. Being scared.
Yeah. Are you ever gonna be doing short films again?
Maybe not directing, but I have one that's currently in the
Oh,
drafts.
okay. Cool. Last two questions. This one's related to the short film. When you got your
Yeah.
award, what's that? Tony Blair?
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
one of those things.
When you got that thing, what was your initial reaction? Were you like, "Yes, I'm gonna make it"? Like, what was going in your head?
No, like when I was receiving the award when I was
Yeah,
there,
yeah.
one of my friends, she told me before I went before I went up on stage, she kind of texted me and she's just like, um, friend and collaborator. She basically told me like, congrats. Before you, as soon as you get on stage, take a moment to just look at everyone and
Mm,
take it in.
that's nice.
So that's what I remember. I remember doing just that. Like I went up on stage and I just looked at everyone. I'm just like, all right, like this is a moment. I'm here.
Mm,
I'm gonna accept it. It's not gonna be like this forever. And then I just took the award. Afterwards, I was just like, oh, this is cool. I'm meeting so much people, but I really wanted to eat. So that was honestly like the first thing in my head. Like I could hear my stomach while
yeah,
I
I'm
was shaking
sure.
hands.
I'm sure. You're just like, this is great.
Because I
Like,
think the
I'm
whole
meeting
day, like
people.
I didn't eat, just because I had that fear of just like not having a good stomach
No, I get it.
when I
Yeah.
was in the ceremony already. So I'm just like, I'm just gonna eat after, and I did. It was the best dinners I've ever had.
Was it given to you, or is it like a buffet thing?
No, it was like no, there was a buffet thing, there was a little meal thing, but like I was just like, I talked to my dad. I was just like, I'm a bounce. Like let's go to Hard Rock. Let's go to like the first ever Hard Rock Cafe and like have like the best burger money
Where
could
was this
buy.
again? I forgot.
London.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is basically our last question. What's
Oh
one piece
no.
of advice you have for younger people in the creative field?
You're not getting any younger, so it's either you're gonna have to learn how to adjust to these times because if I gave you this advice last year, it wouldn't mean anything now.
Mm,
So the best advice I could give is number one, like oh, best ad- yeah, I have a couple of things to say, but like number one, you always have to be learning. And
mm,
learning is sometimes painful. Learning means
yeah.
sometimes getting called out. Learning sometimes means making huge mistakes.
Mm,
And the only way you're going to be okay with that is if you just suck it up, take note, cry
mm,
for like 5 minutes, and then just get back to work.
mm,
And the other thing is you have to pivot. Like, don't hold on to how things are now
mm.
because things are moving so fast that
Good
if
point.
this is where you are now and this is kind of like you're settled, like you're never going to be settled as a
Mm,
creative. If you ever you want to be settled, be a lawyer, be a doctor, be an engineer, because those things, like, the principles don't change all the time.
yeah.
As a
Yeah.
creative, you can have one campaign ready, you can build a campaign for 6 months. And because of a change in atmosphere or a change in the cultural climate, you can't put it out tomorrow.
Yeah.
It's just that simple. Yeah.
It's crazy. Good point. Um, Where can people find you?
I'm private on Instagram.
Yeah.
But
All
you can
right.
try to hit the
That's
follow
true.
button. Follow me on Twitter, but my drafts see everything.
Mm,
And yeah, definitely like follow Monday Off. We're not doing much. We're on hiatus.
mm.
We're focusing on developing each other, and we're
That's
focusing
nice.
on resting.
Yeah.
So we're taking some time off, but do follow us because we wanna sell you stuff. So we're moving into product.
Ah,
Um,
that's fun.
Still
All
have our
right.
services,
Mm.
but we're also trying to just sell product.
Yeah. Sounds great.
Yeah.
All right, pal. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you, bro. Yeah, just wanted to thank you as well. Like I super admire what you do. I
Thank you, bro.
super admire how you were able to kind of just like start your own podcast, and just run with it. I admire the consistency. It's something we've never had. But I do admire that. I think you're one of the
Thank you,
more
man.
disciplined creatives I've ever met. So just keep working, just keep doing it. And yeah, like I appreciate all that you do.
Bro, thank you
Thanks
so
for having me on,
much.
bro.
Thank you so much. Tell me if you like my tweets or you don't like it. I'm just kidding.
So yeah, you'll know.
All right, pal. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, brother.
To see more on
Appreciate
him,
you.
go check out Monday Off and try to hit the follow. All right, thanks, bro.